Over the past decade, Jah9 has established herself as an innovative and distinct voice in reggae music. Creating a sound of jazz influence and dub-based reggae, she released her third vocal studio album, Note to Self, on March 13, 2020. We got the opportunity to discuss the album with her, covering the sound and the words of this well-crafted album. In the end, I was left thinking, she is the real deal. And so will you. Stay tuned.
The system is at fault.
Hello everyone, I'm Gideon St.Helen. Welcome to Irie Roots Reggae Reviews, where we take a deeper look in the nuts and bolts of Roots Reggae albums. Before we go further, if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss anything we post. If you're watching on Facebook, like our page and join in the conversation. It will be really great to hear from you. Born Jah9 Cunningham in Jamaica, Jah9 is a socially conscious Rastafari, a poet, songwriter, a producer, a deep thinker, a seeker of knowledge, and teacher, among other things. There are two qualities I really admire about Jah9, her intentionality and her purposefulness. These are expressed and transmitted in and through her music and really set her apart from the crowd. The first question we had for Jah9 was related to the titles of her three vocal studio albums. Her debut album in 2013 was New Name, which was followed by 9 in 2016 and Note to Self in 2020. My impression is that these albums are intentionally titled to convey a progression of some sort. Jah9 helps us understand the message behind the titles of her album.
They are very intentionally titled, and they do represent a progression, my own evolution, because I try to ensure my music is relevant not just to the time but to my time as a woman evolving. New Name represented me presenting myself to the world in a new way as one element of the meaning, and also representing His Imperial Majesty in a very metaphysical, spiritual way as the new name of salvation for our people. And I went in on those themes within that album and presented also I guess you could call it a mixtape, but it's kind of a conversation around the songs featuring snippets from different books and different interesting, powerful people, His Majesty, Marcus Garvey, Walter Rodney, etc. And put that in with the 9mm and introduce that as to kind of give people the vibe of what was coming in the album. And then that New Name album presented now songs that had to do, they were way more militant, more socio-political, and more reverent to His Majesty and myself and my interpretation of Rastafari in my own life and the experiences that I was having. After establishing myself in that way and putting His Majesty before myself, so that, I mean, that's how I wanted to face the industry. You know, and then now nine was more personal. So this is me stepping out to present myself to the world, my mind space, my head space, the challenges that I face, which are very different from a lot of people, I've realized, because of my upbringing. So there are different things that I find challenging. And I wanted to share it in that context. It was my production. It was a very, very multi-tiered, multi-leveled type of project. And so there are elements of it that I won't be able to describe to you why I did particular things in a particular way. But even on the surface, each of those songs represent a part of myself that I wanted to share. And so I had to be very specific with how the sound was formed around those word sounds as well. So it was kind of a programming. And I know it was really very artsy. This is how it has been described as an artwork, more than a commercial album. So with this project, I really wanted to share, but it really for me was more about how it was received. So it wasn't as much about wanting it to be the way I need it to be to demonstrate, like I did that with 9. So this album now was me meeting my audience a little closer to their home. In terms of the themes, they're still poignant, but I tried not to let them be too dense or too thick with metaphor and the subliminals. I really wanted people to be able to just hear it immediately and connect and relate. And I did that musically as well. Way more collaborations than I usually do. But because it is, and this approach came from the notes that I made to myself over the past 10 years in this industry, almost a decade in this industry, and realizing this is where I need to be. So everything, as you say, it's an evolution. We present the king first, then I present myself, and then I meet the people where they are with this note to self.
You'll notice as you listen to Jah9 that her sound on the 3 albums has varied. Starting with a more rootsy dub-based song with Rory on New Name, to an inclusion of jazzy arrangements on songs like Prosper and Natural Vibe on the album 9. A note to self, she maintains the foundation of roots reggae on the album. However, on songs like Note to Self with Chronix and Field Trip, there is a progressiveness in the musical arrangements. Jah9 compared the song across the albums and talked about what motivates her sound.
As you said, it is an evolution. It did start off very hardcore dub roots, live music strictly. And even in the second album, there was a lot of that influence too. But my sound has always been a fusion of elements of jazz and dub. So the emptiness and space of dub and the dark, deep sounds of dub mixed with the unorthodox approaches of jazz and the melodic minors and the structure of jazz. So rather the way it gives you the freedom to play a little bit outside the lines. I always enjoyed that as a vocalist and as a producer. So I was able to infuse more of that in my own production in the 9 album. And then with this new album, I wanted to progress further now to incorporate elements that are not even in my comfort zone. And by that, I mean more electronic elements, more programmed elements, that fusion of bringing technology into it. Like technology is also a part of dub. And the influences that are the less organic influences also have their place in sound, because not all sound comes from a natural space. Some sounds come from the infusion of technology, and because now we interact with the elements differently with metal and iron, and we hear new sounds. We get new sounds from the environment, and that's the foundation of adding technology to music. It's stretching the limits of what is possible. And I want to always be evolving in that way, but I always keep to the foundation of the roots of the music, the drum and bass drive of it. So even when I experiment and expand, because that's something I try to do in my life as a human being as well. So the music, again, has to be that. If I am continuing to hold firm that it has to be a particular way, then I miss out on an opportunity to evolve. And that wouldn't be possible just based on how I live my life.
Jah9 touched on something here that I need to highlight. She spoke about the openness to the evolution of a sound and going beyond the comfort zone. Now, as a lover of music, as a guitarist who listens to a vast array of music from traditional jazz, smooth jazz, I listen to rock, blues, classical music, especially classical guitar, Afrobeats, and flamenco music, bossa nova, gospel, and so on and so on. My daily go-to music is roots reggae music. That's the music that vibrates at my own frequency. As I've said in other reviews before, I started this channel mainly to share my love of this music, of roots reggae music, and to highlight the great albums and artists like Jah9, whom I believe are advancing reggae music. I also often talk about the importance of maintaining the roots reggae sound, that sound. So I'm less inclined to pay attention to reggae music, quote unquote, that deviates far from, that traditional sound. Now, while Jah9 goes beyond the edges of roots reggae music on this album, Note to Self, overall she maintains all the elements of great roots reggae music, from drum and bass to the spirituality and high consciousness of the lyrics. But I have to say that Jah9 was really able to walk me back from that purist mentality and approach to reggae music to a place where I can embrace more wholeheartedly the progressiveness of the reggae song, especially from the younger artists who are coming up.
Original style, I coined the phrase jazz on dub. So before I even started to record, when I used to just, perform, that was the sound that I would arrange So my arrangements were very much jazz on dub. So I would infuse like artists, like if I was going to cover a song apart from my own personal songs, I would cover like Sizzla Kalonji and Iwin, and I would sing them on jazz rhythm. So because in my mind, like Sizzla Kalonji is a jazz musician, like the way he uses his falsetto and the way he plays with the melody, like I'm into that, you know? So there's space, and we have to be flexible and open. Like this idea of reggae as a pure, there's no pure anything. Like music is a hybrid. Every music we have right now comes from the fact that we have been influenced by even Europe. Even though the roots of it all is on the continent of Africa, like we can't shun our influences. That is to deny ourselves, you know? It's just a matter of taste. So I don't really like this idea of, you know, the reggae purists. And I mean, that is a lot of times that is a kind of Eurocentric type of vibe, this idea of a purist type of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah.
The arrangement, the song, the production and recording on this album, Note to Self, are exceptional. Jah9 talked with us about some of the people who helped produce this album, and she is also a co-producer of this album.
Some Irish producers, some young producers, some older producers, a nice cross-section I was able to pull together for this round. I have producers like Clive Hunt, who is like pretty much co-produced the whole album with me, and he's brilliant, genius, like legendary. So that has been a tremendously rewarding experience, being able to work with the likes of Clive Hunt. Teflon Zinc Fence, he's one of the more contemporary Jamaican sounds, fusing that dub but still having that electronic influence of using the computer to augment the sound, which is dub too, you know, it's just not analog dub. But we have to appreciate all of the sounds, as we say. And younger producers even still, like Ayotosh Poiser and Runkus, who is an artist / producer. And they, at the time, you know, I wanted to give them a platform as well to because I knew they're experimenting with sounds and they're young and they have good imaginations, and I wanted to give them a space. And they're youths who have a lot of respect and show me a lot of love. So I wanted to give them a space to share something on my project as well. And they came in and they did a really good job. The first track that I heard from them that I fell in love with was the music for Highly. I love that rhythm so much because that's a song I wrote so many years ago. And then I finally found a song that worked with it, you know? And so I was really able to develop on that and do something great. And then with Note to Self, that was more collaborative with, you know, me, Ayatosh Ronkus, and Chronix, production-wise. And that's the most collaborative song I've ever done. And I thought, beautiful, because a message like that needs to have all of the feels from all of the different spaces where people can feel from, man and woman and young people and, you know, older people and softness and hardness. It was a nice little mashup.
As Jah9 said earlier, the album Note to Self has more collaborations than she typically includes on her albums. To me, she really doesn't need to feature other artists because she has such a dynamic vocal range. She's not monotonous. She sings, she chants, she can do these jazzy runs, and she's melodious. She can keep the listener's attention throughout a full-length album. But on this album, she featured 3 household names: Chronix, Pressure Bus Pipe, and Taurus Riley. What I really appreciate, and I said this to Jah9 during the interview, is that their voices complemented hers really well and didn't take over the songs. This allowed the album to flow seamlessly from one song to the next without, the sonic interruptions that multiple collaborations with different vocal styles can conjure. We'll now take a deeper look into the meaning of some of the songs on the album. But before that, it's really important to note that Jah9 has a background as a poet. We wanted to know how this background informs her approach to songwriting.
My background as a poet, I've been a poet that's my longest career. I've been reading since I was very young. And I think that made a difference. And then being born a pastor's daughter, that means there's a particular, like if you grew up in the church, obviously you're going to have to learn to read early. You have to read the Bible, you have to read hymns, you have to, everything is written down. So you have to do that and have your own Bible and your own hymn book, and you have to read the program, and you have to read, there's so much to read. And so you get to understand how words work in different contexts. So you get to know the difference between a story versus prose versus poetry versus hymns versus scripture. And for me, because I mean, I don't know how you into astrology you are, but even astrologically, like I am a headspace person. I ruled by my intelligence. So I'm into reading. I'm into acquiring knowledge. And very, very early when I learned to read, like the books that were available to me because my parents were like doing postgraduate work when I was growing up, when I was in those formative years. So I was reading those psychology and sociology and theology books as well. And that kind of informed my perspective of what was happening around me and observing how my parents were being treated by others and how they were respected, not because of money or status, but because they were decent people. And just understanding that I had to share my parents. And so I had to be okay with the fact that I don't have them at my disposal all the time. So I had a very rich internal environment. And I'm the last child. So I spent a lot of time in my own head. And writing became very, very cathartic for me, very therapeutic to just put my thoughts down. If I didn't have somebody to share it with, it wasn't, I could self-comfort from very early. And this is something my parents noted of me. Like, I've always been that way where I can be by myself. I'll find something to do. And then even my siblings. So I grew up in a family that encouraged those kinds of pursuits. And I could share my writing with my family and very, very close-knit type of vibe. They'd sit down and everybody gave me an audience so I could tell them what I wrote. So, and this is like maybe 5, 6 years old. And this just continued. So I've been consistently writing since that age. And then now it's like so many tens of thousands of hours of penning my thoughts. So it's effortless for me to do this. And then when I went to university and I started to share, because I didn't do it to share mostly, I did it for myself. And once I started to share and I realized how people responded to my words, then I was like, okay, maybe I should do more of this. And I was always singing, always in choirs, always musical, but writing my own words, it didn't even occur to me until much later that I could do that too. And once I started to do it, things started to move very quickly. Like it was a great pull factor. So I always knew it's something I could lean back on. But you grow up, you go to school, you go to university, you have student loan to pay off, you come out, you do that whole corporate treadmill for a while. And I did well there too. But I knew it wasn't what I wanted to do. So I started to write with the intention of potentially sharing it in that way as an artist. And I toyed with the idea. And every time I put my foot in the water, the reception was so overwhelming that I'm like, okay, maybe I'm supposed to do this. And in studying at school, you realize, okay, I did human resource development and psychology and criminology. And it's like, how do you serve with this? My parents are servants. How am I going to serve? And then it's like your purpose unveils itself to you the more sincerely you deal with life. Yeah. And if you spend enough time alone, you're going to start to hear things from yourself. You're going to start to understand yourself and what you like and what you don't like and what your body responds to and what your heart responds to. And I figured out what I was supposed to do. And it was justified and validated by the reception I got from the people who would hear and from the industry and the players in the industry who could make a difference. And so I ended up really being able to chart a very unique path for myself in this industry up to this day.
The album comes across as transparent and personal, note to self, as if Jah9 is opening a page of a diary to the listener. We wanted to know how personal the album is to her own lived experiences.
It's extremely personal, but it's not specific. You know what I mean? So they're very extremely personal elements, but I do use artistic license to make them into stories that are more universally relatable. And that's why I will use a lot of analogies. In general, in life, I use a lot of metaphor and analogies because my life is a bit unique, I realize. And so the elements that I find people are able to relate to, I will embellish on them to make the point because it's bigger than just telling you my business. I'm trying to get a point across, so I will use metaphors from the Bible. I will use metaphors from life and food in order to make them more relatable,
Yeah.
Like on the previous album, like in a song like Spiritual Woman, the greatest threat to the status quo. I didn't want to do that with this record. I wanted it to be more easily digestible. you know?
Yeah.
So
So
the issues are very much more on the surface on this one.
We then ask about the central themes of the album. One that's obvious to me is really finding and choosing true love. And we'll get to a couple of the songs that focused on this specific theme in a while. But Jah9 talked to us about the central themes in this album.
The major themes, there are quite a few of them too, right? And like some songs have multiple themes, some songs are very straightforward. So themes like sacrifice, balance, and the self-study toward self-mastery, and clearly mental health and wellness. Things like reciprocity and the idea of collaboration and discipline and herb as access to yourself and nutrition and the interpersonal dynamic and, you know, the chemetic source of it all. And of course, intimacy. Like these themes, these are they.
In the interest of time, we can't talk about every song of this 15-track album, but we got to ask Jah9 about several of the songs. The first song we asked about is Heaven, Ready for the Feeling. Our question was really basic. What feeling is Jah9 talking about here?
If you listen to the verses will tell you what it is we're ready for. So there's a lot of time. The idea of heaven is presented to us as something that is an afterlife. So it's after you slave away and do all the, you know, the work in life, then you get to enjoy a heaven as your reward. So my idea is we're ready for that feeling now. I don't buy this idea that you have to wait and work for however many years and slave away to gain the right to feel love and joy and peace and abundance. Like those are things you are entitled to because you are in earth realm. And it's just a matter of alignment with your purpose that allows you to live in that heaven space constantly. So it's like, I deserve that mindset now. And I want to work. And the work I'm doing is not for external purposes. It is to ensure that I can be in that heaven mind state now. So even if I have to do mundane things, I'm still in that heaven mind state. That feeling I want to conjure, I must be able to maintain it because heaven is that. Heaven isn't my reward for everything after. It is, I have access to it now. So my work must be toward achieving heaven now. That's the feeling I'm ready for.
In this same song, Jah9 sings, "The sacrifices I people made, reparations are still unpaid, but my potential is unrestrained." Later on in the song, she says, "So just forget about the past mistakes." Now, these are powerful lyrics, but are they contradictory? Take a listen to this profound answer that Jah9 gave us.
We're not saying forget the past. We're saying forget the past mistakes. Because we have a tendency to hold on to our mistakes or what we consider to be mistakes. So considering anything to be a mistake causes you to look at that as a negative thing that has happened to you. But if we have a mindset that everything that has happened and every choice that I've made is a part of what was predestined for me to do, and I'm doing it. So there are no errors. Everything is a part of the growth going forward. And if we have a mindset in that way, then we can look at slavery and all of its vestiges and everything we were left with. That wasn't a mistake, but that has passed. And if it is my ancestors did all of that and did all of that work to remove us out of that space and continue to do that work, you know, then how do I honor them? Do I honor them by living in that tortured space, or do I honor them by accepting my royalty now and my birthright and living in that space, living forward? So yes, Sankofa, understand and learn from the past, but don't let it be a millstone around your neck. Let it be a platform on which you can stand and know what you deserve. And reparations, even that term, reparations is not a handout that a white man is going to give you. Reparations is how you govern your mind as well. So it means when I am taking and when I am expecting and when I am using the law of attraction to summon things to myself, I'm not worried that I don't deserve. I know I deserve, right? Because my ancestors have done that work. So everything coming to me is reparations. And if I can move doubt out of my mind, because our minds is really the mind, you know. That's why it's about self-study and mastery. Because when you understand what you are supposed to be doing and your particular path, and it's not impossible to do that. And if you can understand and live in that space, then you will be attracting things efficiently. But we live in a doubt space and an uncertainty space and an insecure space. So if those are the thoughts that our concentration, that's the power. That's what we're using our concentration power for. We're going to bring those things. So concentrate on the things you want rather than on the things you don't want.
The next song we talked about is Mayat, Each Man, a term I was not really familiar with before this album and had to do some research before I spoke with Jah9 in this interview. This song demonstrates her songwriting skills and her range as a vocalist, moving from beautiful jazzy vocals to rap or chant.
So, Ma'at is how it's pronounced, M-A'-A-T. And it is one of the fundamental principles within the Kemetic tree of life. So I put a song like Ma'at and title it that way, even though I don't sing and resound that word in the song, but that is to encourage people to go and look for things. And I like to do that with my music as well, is present a theme that I'm not going to go and expound on it. I'm expecting you to do that if you really are, interested in the theme. It represents the 11 laws of God. It represents how to ascend through the use of balance and balancing, balance and justice and truth and the divine feminine. All of these principles are wrapped into this goddess deity personified. So all of these metaphors are ancient Kemetic principles that are a part of building the human into an evolved creature, evolving us out of just our flesh consciousness and bringing us to a God consciousness where we don't expect that the Most High is something outside of us watching us, but we understand the essence of it being something that is within us that we can work toward and manifest and purify ourselves and purify away and strip away all of the things of the world that have, caused us to be so attached to suffering. And then the song now speaks to balance because it talks about, it's kind of, don't judge anyone else on where they are on their journey, because the journey is a personal one. It is about finding balance within yourself. So if we are working on balance within ourselves, we have no space to be judging anyone else because we don't know their context or their purpose.
We then talked about Note to Self featuring Chronix, the title track of the album. This song is so important for the times that we found ourselves in, crucial times. She says repeatedly, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. Even with everything going on around us or stuff that's going on within us. Jah9 talked to us about the motivation for this song, of what to me looks like her philosophy of life. This is someone who exudes an aura of tranquility.
That's exactly it. You hit the nail on the head. That's right there. Okay. And this is not just true for me, but there are many of us who, because we are listening so attentively within ourselves. Yeah, not that I am perfect, but that art of listening within myself, it comes from the fact that I spent so much time alone. I mean, by choice, because I wanted to learn more about myself. That is my primary occupation, is like learning about myself throughout the years. So when I knew what this album needed to bring forward, I didn't know how to communicate that to the label or to anyone else. I didn't feel it necessary to do that. You only communicate what is necessary. You don't have to bare your soul and your reasons behind everything. But I knew when I started to see the songs that were coming forward out of my imagination, out of the divine, toward this album, I realized that I was being prepared to serve this particular purpose. Like it was supposed to be a comfort. The song Note to Self, it's like a lullaby. It's one of those songs that the world is falling down around you, but you are in the embrace of the master who is comforting you, reminding you that don't just close your eyes, don't look around. Just remember and know. All of it is an illusion. You are safe. You are safe. All is as it should be, no matter what. Just, it's kind of that kind of reassurance. And as the song evolved, even the song itself as it evolved, I just softened and continued to soften around it. And the way I originally, and it was my brothers, it was so interesting how it was my brothers who worked on the song with me, who helped to kind of solidify in my mind that this needs to be a softer song. Mm-hmm. It needs to be a softening. And so that's kind of where it was. It really is a matter of serving a purpose. Before it was even completed, the purpose was set because Jah didn't know what was going to happen in earth and that this whole record needed to be what it was and be released right at the time when it was necessary.
The song Field Trip is different in arrangement and highlights the talented musicians involved on this project, from the use of syncopated drum beats, the shaft-like guitar chops, harmonic brass arrangements, and soulful bass line. The arrangement of the song really allowed Jah9 to explore her vocal range. We were curious to know what Jah9 was aiming for on this song.
This song was my wanting to connect with the Afrobeat sound. I wanted to connect with that. It's not something like I will listen to Fela Kuti. I remember we were listening to a lot of Fela Kuti. I was in Belgium working with one of the producers who is one of my dearest friends, Brett Puraman of Lost Ark Studios in Lost Ark Music in Belgium, and we were in his studio, and he has a very old school style studio, like very padded drums and ancient instruments and very antique microphones and very old school vibe. And listening, and then just and my drummer at the time, he had never really played that kind of syncopation before. He'd never played Afrobeat, so to speak. And so I was literally in front of him dancing so that he would just watch me and get a vibe, because I knew I wanted to bring that forward. And then when I brought all those songs back to Jamaica and Uncle Clive heard it, he was like, he got what I was trying to do. And then he amplified it by saying, switch the drum beat as well. So that idea of moving it between that Afrobeat drum back to the pop, 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 pop.
Yeah.
That was, his infusion now. And that's just his genius bringing it forward. So, cross-continental collaboration to bring us Field Trip.
As we mentioned earlier, one of the themes of this album is finding and choosing true love. We ask about two songs related in message, but with different outcomes. In Highly Get to Me, the message is get away from the man who is not motivated by a love for Jah. Then in Love Has Found I, Jah9 sung about taking a risk and letting a brother in. A man with no money, he's kinda young, is her reflection, but he learned from the example of a king. She says love from the lion brings access to Zion. We asked Jah9 to talk a little bit about these two songs and the main message she's conveying. But one thing is that we missed that there is an actual third song that is part of that progression. The third song is You and I, featuring Pressure Bust Pipe. Jah9 explains.
Well, it's actually 3 songs. Yeah, so there's Highly, Love Has Found I, and You and I. And they're a progression. So the story begins with first clearing the way with a song like Highly. And then allowing something and then identifying what it is you need to look for so that when something comes, you know it's the right fit for you. In Love Has Found I. And then You and I now, allowing to bask in what happens when you allow the right thing to set and take root.
An interesting consideration for fans of reggae music is the future of this music. We asked Jah9 about where she sees reggae music heading to.
Still waiting to see a lot of things, but I know innovation is going to be required. The shape of the music industry in general is going to change, and I think it is a very powerful opportunity for reggae music to evolve into something, to evolve into the future, for us to see where the young people who have the power now in the industry how we're going to connect with the older people who were holding the guard before, and know that things are changing and things are becoming more tech savvy because we're in that socially distanced space. Reggae music requires like intimacy and gathering, because at the root of the essence of reggae music is Rastafarian roots and culture, which require togetherness. So I think an evolution is on the way, and beautiful potential for those who are brave and who are willing to change.
As we often do, we asked Jah9 about her favorite song on the album.
I guess I could say that My Art is my favorite, just because when that dub drop out, oh my God, that's like, But then at another time, I'll feel like Highly as well, because I get to really explore my spoken word side there. So it really depends on the mood. And then I'll say a song like New Race, because New Race is like my mission statement for this year. It's I found a way out and I'm here in Tanzania. So different songs at different times.
Finally, Jah9 worked with Vaughn Benjamin of Baker Midnight on the track A Spiritual Woman is the Greatest Threat to the Status Quo of her second album, 9. Rest in peace to a great man, Vaughn Benjamin. Jah9 talked with us about what it was like working with Vaughn Benjamin.
He is an impressive human being, and I feel very, very honored to have been able to call that man my friend. It's not often you meet an artist who you respect so much and you actually are more impressed with them when you meet them in the flesh. I feel so blessed to have been able to not just interact with him and converse with him and build with him, but to create with him, see his process and to see his discipline and diligence in that process. And then to see how he put his work even ahead of himself. Like, he is just remarkable. There is much that I just cannot express with words. But I give thanks that I was able to have shared time and space with that energy.
To the more mundane part of this review, we scored the album Note to Self following the Irie Roots Reggae review criteria. For originality, authenticity, as we said earlier, Jah9 is an innovative and unique artist, and she has created her own sound. We gave 10 over 10 here. For lyricism, the lyrics are poetic, thoughtful, and thought-provoking. We gave 10 over 10 here also. For production and instrumentation, the recording is well balanced, the compositions and performances are really well done. We gave 10 over 10 here too. For coherence of the album, I will need to be consistent here with the way that I've reviewed previous albums. Since we are reviewing this album specifically as a reggae album and not just as a music album, the song Field Trip, it falls more in the category of soul, of Afrobeat. And the song Could Be, it falls more in a neo-soul vibe. And because of that, you have somewhat of a break in the sonic coherence of the album as a reggae album. So for coherence, I give it an 8 out of 10 here. The interesting thing is that Field Trip is one of my favorite songs on the album because of the instrumentation and the arrangement. The last criterion is accessibility, advanced reggae music, straight 10 out of 10 here also. Overall, the Irie Roots Reggae score is 9.6 out of 10 or 96%, which is really an excellent reggae album. I hope you enjoyed this interview and that it got you to appreciate Jah9 and her music a little bit more. Jah9 is an exceptional artist. Her intentionality, her purposefulness, and her thoughtfulness have really placed her at the forefront of the evolving sound of reggae music. I'm grateful that she took the time to chat with me, answering all of these questions. Until next time, as we always say, live life Irie and listen to roots. Blessings.